Welcome to Extra Credit with the Professor. I'm Peter Emerson. Every once in a while, an interview comes about in a way you simply couldn't plan. A couple of weeks ago, I was making my way home from Germany when I spotted a guy in the Hamburg airport wearing a t shirt that simply said faith, with the T shaped like a cross. I liked the shirt, so I told him, and that started a conversation. And somewhere in the course of that conversation, I discovered that the guy I was talking to was Aidan Mullen, a longtime member of the touring crew for one of the biggest rock bands in the world, Def Leppard. For more than 2 decades, Aidan has worked closely with bassist Rick Savage, serving as his bass technician and traveling the world as part of the Def Leppard organization. Well, that means countless concerts, massive tours, arenas, and stadiums, and some of the biggest festivals in rock, including Wacken Open Air, which is where Def Leppard had just performed when Aidan and I happened to cross paths in Hamburg. But what interested me wasn't really the gear. It was the guy wearing the faith shirt. How does somebody build a career that puts him on stages and behind the scenes with some of the biggest names in rock music? What does more than 20 years in that world teach you about music, musicianship, success, and life? And what role does faith play when that life takes you all over the world? So, from a chance conversation in the Hamburg airport to extra credit with the professor, Aidan Mullen, welcome.
Thanks, Peter.
Hey, Aidan, let's go all the way back to the beginning because I really don't know this part of your story. Before Def Leppard, before touring the world, and all this became your career, where did you grow up, and how did music first become part of your life?
Oh, wow. So I grew up in Northern California, the San Francisco Bay Area. My dad was an immigrant from Ireland who met my mother in San Francisco, and they got married, and he brought her back over to Ireland for their honeymoon, and it kind of changed the whole trajectory of everything at that point. Um, my dad was a fairly famous crooner in Ireland. He had quite a following in the late 50s,
Wow.
moving into the early 60s. I was born in 1962, so primarily the late 50s. But he had quite a name for himself back then. And his vocal style was much the same as Bing Crosby, Perry Como, Nat King Cole, that type of Frank
That's
Sinatra.
that's a great songbook right there, all of
Right.
that.
And he was amazing. I lost him in 2018, but even after he retired, we lived in California for quite a while, all of my formative years. When he retired and they moved back, he was approached by a promoter over there. Now he was in his 80s at that point. Um, he was approached by a promoter that he knew early on and was asked would he consider getting together with his piano playing accompanist of years past and do a concert in Dublin, which he did, and it was recorded and it was videoed and it was sensational, and it was like he'd been on stage his entire life. So that was my earliest musical influence. I can remember laying on the floor of our home at an early age, listening to records by those that I just mentioned. Um,
Wow.
so I grew up with that. And then also Irish traditional music was pretty popular in our home as well. But I got the bug at 13 years old. I decided that I wanted to play guitar. I played trumpet for a year. I played trombone for 2 or 3 years.
Mhm.
You know, I learned a lot from it. I learned a lot about what I didn't want to do. But it was all good experience. But at 13, I decided, nope, I want to rock. And
Yeah.
my parents rented me my first electric guitar with the promise that if I applied myself, um, that after that 6 month period, they would buy me a guitar if I had practiced and done all the stuff. And little did they know the monster that they were creating at that point, because it was they couldn't get the guitar out of my hands at that point, you know.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I'm a recovering trombone player myself, so I understand.
Yeah, it was all good. I mean, it was important. It was an important part of my education. I probably could have taken it further. I'm you know, the theory aspect of things. I'm sure that you're well versed in music theory. I
Mhm.
know enough to get by, enough to get me in trouble. But what I did have from my dad's influence and just listening to music. I mean, gosh, you know, 1972. If you go back to 1972 and do a Google search of Hot 100 singles of that year, I had my mother's little white plastic Panasonic AM FM radio with a little antenna that you pulled up, you know,
Yeah.
and I would sit on the floor and I would listen to that thing. And in 1972, I would have been 10 years old. But you look at those songs and you see what was starting to insinuate its stuff into my brain, you know. And back then, there weren't pigeonhole radio stations. We had KFRC in San Francisco, and they played everything, every genre of music. And it would be Led Zeppelin, followed by Dolly Parton, followed by Steve Miller, followed by Jim Croce, followed by
Yeah.
Sly and the Family Stone. Just an incredible assortment of music. And I loved all of it. And I developed a really strong sense of rhythm, I guess,
Yeah.
and which has served me better than any of the the, the official schooling that I got.
Sure. Let me comment on what you said earlier. So back to the listening. Okay, so I believe that there are two sides to this. There is the theory side, but there's also the exposure and the listening side.
Mhm.
And if you develop your ear through listening, you can have a great career without anything else.
Oh yeah,
But if you only do the theory side but don't develop your ear, you're probably not gonna thrive.
right, right,
You'd be an academic at best.
right.
But if you have the ear and you develop the theory side, I think that's where you can really just the world is your oyster.
Yeah, you're unstoppable at that point.
Yeah,
Absolutely, I agree 100%.
absolutely.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. So at what point did you actually realize that there might be a career in this for you?
Well, you know, starting at 13, I applied myself more than my parents expected. All through high school, I had a band with some friends, and we were, you know, one of the most popular local weekend high school party bands. You know,
Nice.
and that's really when I knew what I wanted to do. The San Francisco Bay Area is was a very unique kind of place in that as I was coming up in it, so I graduated high school in 1980.
Hmm.
Really made an effort to work through several bands in the Bay Area, but what I did find was that the San Francisco Bay Area was a very closed. Uh, the music business was a very closed, you know, organization. They only worked with people that they knew. It was very difficult. I spent years trying to get into that niche, you know,
Hmm.
and what a lot of folks did was they moved to LA, and I know a lot of peers that moved down there and did very well. I know a lot that didn't do very well, but they all went down there and they all made that effort. That was just not something that I was interested in doing. The whole LA scene never really, for me, has had any draw. You know, I'm not interested. I wasn't interested. Didn't want to do it. And I think, you know, did it prevent me from doing what I wanted to do? Maybe a little bit because I'm not a rock star. And that was kind of what I envisioned for myself. Well, I'm not a rock star, but a successful, well thought of guitar player, and later bass player. Um, but that was a very difficult time for me. Although it was an enjoyable time, I'll tell you, I had some fun. I met some people that are to this day family to me. Some of the musicians that I worked with side by side in the Bay Area later on. But I also had, I'm a technical guy. My grandfather taught me carpentry, plumbing, electrical, everything he did other than being a butcher, which was something that he did as well. But he really taught me a lot of it. My dad wasn't a technical guy, and he would be happy to admit that.
Yeah.
So
Technical, but all with your hands.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, absolutely, absolutely. And to this day, it drives my wife nuts. But I, rather than calling somebody saying, "Hey, the air conditioning is broken," I go out there and figure out what's wrong with it. So I was working in the Bay Area. Now, where I grew up was a town called Los Altos, just south of San Francisco, a little bit north of San Jose. And when my parents moved away twice. They moved away the first time when I graduated high school. They moved back to Ireland at that point because my dad had a business venture that he wanted to investigate. So I stayed behind, started my first year of college, got about 3 months into that and said, I can't do this and pay for my, I got to get a full-time job. So unfortunately, my trajectory changed at that point. It's all good. I mean, it was just something that had to happen. I chose self-sustenance over, I didn't want to sleep on somebody's couch. I didn't want to admit to my parents that, hey, maybe I should have gone with you. I was in it to win it, at that point. And one of the things I did well, and one of the things that my grandfather taught me was soldering. And I will admit, I'm OCD. I'm an ADHD kid who developed OCD tendencies to make up for my scatterbrain, in a million directions at once. And I was offered a job by a friend of mine at a high-tech startup at this little electronic company in an area that, a few years later was renamed Silicon Valley. At that point, I was working, I was doing well. I was working on stuff that was being built for military use, and they had very strict requirements as to what could and couldn't be done and how it had to be done. And so I learned the mil spec aspect of electronic assembly and troubleshooting and wiring and soldering and this and the other. So I'm doing all of that, and we had a magazine in the Bay Area called BAM, Bay Area Music Magazine, and that just the Bay Area as a whole, even though it was hard as a musician to break into the scene, the music scene in San Francisco was extraordinary. I'm sure you've heard plenty about some of the older bands that came from the area, and bands like Led Zeppelin and others that came to the Bay Area and played famous concerts. So it was an amazing creative scene in that regard. I picked up this magazine one day, and they would have, I'd go straight to the back first, because it would have all the listings of all the upcoming concerts.
Mm-hmm.
Right behind that were the classifieds, and I'd go through the classifieds, and every once in a while you'd see a guitar for sale, an amplifier for sale, maybe a job in a music store opening up or something else. And I saw this tiny little ad. It was about 2 inches by 2 inches. And it said, the Eric Martin Band is looking for a guitar roadie. I'm paraphrasing. If interested, call Zeke Clark at 707, whatever the phone number was at the time. And I thought to myself, this is interesting. I can string a guitar, I can tune a guitar, I can play a guitar, I can fix a guitar, I can build cables, I can figure out what's wrong with an amplifier or a pedal on the floor or something else.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go ahead and call this guy and see what's what. Now, to qualify, the Eric Martin band were Eric Martin from the band Mr. Big.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So this
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
this was a band that was hugely popular on the local level, somewhat popular on the national level, and then for whatever reason, they had a huge following in Japan.
Yeah. I think I saw them open for Rush.
Yep.
Actually.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Yep.
And yes, that's funny. I was just thinking about that about an hour ago. Mr. Big did.
Yes.
So the Eric Martin band was a band that myself and my girlfriend at the time had seen several times in local clubs, and we really liked them. They had some great songs, great presence, and everything else. I thought, I'm going to call this guy and just see what's what. So I did, and I never got a call back. Called him 3 times, left messages, never got a call back. So I could have been discouraged at that point and gone on with what I was doing, but that's not in my nature. I'm kind of a pit bull when it comes to getting at things that I think are right for me. So I did a little bit of research and realized that Eric was managed by Herbie Herbert, Nightmare Management, who also handled Journey at the time. So I called their office in San Francisco and I got on the phone with this guy, Sandy Einstein, who was, as it turns out, was Eric's handler for Nightmare Management. And I introduced myself and I said, listen, I have tried to call this guy. I'm wondering if this position is still open. I think I'd be a good candidate, all that good stuff. He says, give me a half an hour and I'll have him call you.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So he did. And they ended up hiring me. And I walked away from what could only be considered a potentially lucrative career in Silicon Valley to make $50 a show working for the Eric Martin band, playing in clubs and co-driving a 24-foot long bobtail truck and setting all the gear up, just myself and this guy Zeke. That we could do a whole story about him at some point. But I gave it all up for this job, and I got to tell you, I've never really looked back. I've wondered occasionally, what if? But you know, I made exactly the right choice at exactly the right time.
Wow.
And funnily enough, shortly thereafter, Eric dissolved the band. I didn't see that coming. I didn't know it was it was in the cards at that point. So in reality, I only worked for him for maybe 6 months, 5 months. And then Zeke, my coworker, hooked us up, the two of us up, with another Bay Area band called Billy Satellite, based over in the Oakland, Alameda area on the other side of the water. They had a current radio single out, and they were getting ready to go out and support Night Ranger on their Midnight Madness tour. So this was 1984.
Fantastic.
And so the next thing you know, Zeke and I are in this truck driving an entire truck full of band gear from San Francisco to Atlanta, Georgia. I'd never driven across the country before. I'd never been to Texas or Alabama or Mississippi or Georgia or any of these other places before in my life. So it was the most interesting experience I had had to date. And the rest is kind of history. Midnight Madness was a huge record for Night Ranger. Then in October of that year, I think October of that year, they decided they were done with their touring cycle. They went home, and we went straight out with the Jefferson Starship at that point. And supported them. So from a technical aspect, I fell right into it. I really, there's only a couple of people that I can say helped me along the way in such a way where they offered me ideas and suggestions and, hey, if you do it this way instead of that way, you'll save yourself some time. if you do it this way instead of that way, your guitar will stay in tune longer, things like
Mm-hmm.
that, you know. But I realized early on that maybe I could, I could go in this slightly different direction. Never
Yeah.
really gave up on the playing, and then fast forward a few years later, I ended up after Billy Satellite, they kind of fell off the radar. They were a little bit of a one hit wonder, although they were great band. I wound up working for another San Francisco Bay Area band called Y&T. Used to be called Yesterday and Today. I saw them back in the 70s, open for Boston, if I'm not mistaken, in San Francisco, years before that. But found myself working for them. They didn't have a lot of work for me, but I enjoyed it nonetheless and made some great friends that are still friends. And then one day, I got a phone call from a guy um, asking if I would be interested in going to work for another Bay Area band called Metallica.
Never heard of them.
No. And so this was 1986. My parents had moved back to the Bay Area. They had invited me to move back in with them temporarily to just kind of, since I was trying to make the music thing work and wasn't making a ton of money at it yet. They felt guilty enough leaving me behind in 1980 that when they came back in 1985, they said, "Come on, you can live here with us for a while."
Wow, that's amazing.
So I did
So
that.
were you with Metallica right before they really broke?
I would say so. I was with Metallica. That was during the Master of Puppets stuff,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
and so yes, I would say yes to that because when I went and started working for them, they were opening for Ozzy Osbourne.
Right.
So yeah, Master of Puppets, and they hadn't really done much headlining stuff at that point yet, unless you consider clubs and things like that in the Bay Area and maybe LA and some other places. So when I went to work with them, it was like an explosion at that point. I think that
Hmm.
things were moving so quickly that it was kind of hard to get a handle on it.
So
Um,
I saw Metallica in I think it was '89 on the And Justice for All tour
mhm.
in Norfolk, Virginia.
Okay.
Would you have been with them at that time?
Not at that point. Not at that point. What I was working up to was I had I'd found this new uh, direction
Yeah.
uh, that I was working through and making a serious effort at it. But in the back of my mind, there was always the little voice that was saying, "Are you sure? Are you sure? Don't you want to play music? Don't you want to be the guy that maybe has somebody tuning your guitars for you?"
Yeah, absolutely.
That really wasn't part of the thought process. But so as Metallica were growing, um, we lost the bass player in a bus accident over in Sweden. We eventually found a new bass player um, and started doing shows, went to Japan and other places. And then as things were at that point, then they were really cranking, you know.
Yeah.
And I had a long conversation with the production manager at that point, and he said, "How do you?" Because he knew what I was all about,
Hmm.
no secrets. And he says, "How do you feel about all this?" And I said, "Well, to be honest with you, I think now might be my last chance to pull back and reinvestigate whether or not I think I have what it takes to play successfully." Sorry, there's a little no-see-um flying around here. Um, that was a really difficult decision to make. Um, and but it was necessary, and I made that decision, and no harm, no foul. They weren't mad at me. They weren't. I imagine they were disappointed, but they, we made it through the transition. They made it obviously through the transition.
Yeah.
And so I came back home, and I got a job at that point at Mesa Boogie, who make amplifiers.
Mm-hmm.
They're a real popular company up in the North Bay, Petaluma,
Sure.
California. And I just went in fixing stuff. A couple of my friends, musician friends that worked there, said, "Hey, there's a position, you can go in there and troubleshoot and maybe touch up wiring on it," because all their stuff was hand wired and strict detail. It was right up my Strasse. It was exactly what I was in the headspace for. So I did that, and they were very supportive of me playing at night. They'd let me take time off to go do shows, as they would others that worked for the company. And I did that for a while. And that basically led me up to eventually getting a gig with Eddie Money. I played with Eddie Money for 3.5 years. He was somebody I had seen for the first time back in 1977. And I kid you not, on the barricade at a place called the Cow Palace in San Francisco, seeing this guy come out, spinning his tambourine, playing his saxophone, bluesy rock band, great rhythm, great everything, great songs. And I thought to myself, now that's the band I'd want to play in one day. Literally.
So just to clarify, you're not teching for Eddie Money. No, you're playing with Eddie Money.
Playing guitar for Eddie Money and singing. Yes.
That's fantastic.
It was. And I can tell you that it was some of the best times I've ever had in my life. I made friendships there that have lasted a lifetime. There was some quirkiness. There were some interesting situations towards the end of my tenure. But that led me to a completely different direction. I met the woman that I would end up marrying at an Eddie Money show.
So is it safe to say that Eddie Money gave you your 2 tickets to paradise?
I don't know. He probably overcharged me. I should see if I can still get a refund or at least a credit. So, that all happened. Party in the Park in Toledo, Ohio on the Maumee River. Thousands and thousands of people. And I meet this girl there, and the rest is history.
So you married a good Midwestern girl. That's good.
I sure did.
I grew up in Adrian, Michigan, which is 35 minutes away from Toledo, Ohio.
No, right where it is.
And I saw my first concert at the Toledo Sports Arena.
Wow.
Which is no longer there. I'm sure you've been there.
Oh yeah. Yeah. They needed to do something about that place for a long time.
That was Triumph and Fastway.
Oh, no kidding.
Yep.
Wow. Amazing. Triumph for back out. You know that. I don't know if you know.
Yeah. They just came through Texas.
They got a bunch of extra guys now, but which I think is totally unnecessary. But yeah, I was a huge Triumph fan back then.
Oh yeah.
And so, meeting my wife, and, I would fly to Ohio, and then she flew out to California, and then I flew out to Ohio again for Christmas and got to know her family and all this stuff. And one day she says to me, if this is going to do anything more than it's doing right now, I probably need to come out, because she knew I'm not moving to Ohio. No offense to anybody from Ohio.
None at all.
But I wasn't ready to do anything different than what I was doing in Northern California. I had a great, really cool apartment in Marin County and lived up on a hill in the trees and had some great friends. And I had two of my best friends, three of my best friends played with Elvin Bishop at the time. Another one of my best friends played drums with the Starship. He was the drummer in the Starship back in 1984 when I toured with them. And we're all still friends. I'm looking at a photo right now of actually, as I've been going through photographs. There's a photo of me with Elvin Bishop there. That was about 1992, maybe 1991, thereabouts.
Wow.
That's what I looked like back then. But we would all get together and we would do a Monday night at a club called New George's, or a Thursday night at a place called Trevor's, which was pretty dubious, but what a great fun time that was.
Hmm.
Or any of these other local. Most of them were bars instead of clubs, but we would go in there and we'd play Allman Brothers and Little Feat and Leonard Skinner and Stevie Ray Vaughan stuff, and just mostly sloppy blues,
Yeah.
and have a great time with it. So that was during my tenure with Eddie. This was all happening. When my wife moved out to California, uh, I I had decided that it was time to move on. Some things were going on towards the end that weren't. It wasn't a happy place
Yeah.
at that point. Myself and the keyboard player both left Eddie's band at the same time. He moved straight to Nashville, and he and I had known each other for a long time. We would talk occasionally, and he called me one day. We were living then at that point. We'd moved up to Sonoma County, up to Santa Rosa. My wife and I. She was not happy in Northern California. It was a beautiful place to her, but everybody she ran into, blush,
Thank you.
everyone she ran into didn't impress her. People.
It's a little bit of a culture shock.
It is a little bit of a culture shock,
Yeah.
especially coming directly from the Midwest. She's an animal person. She got a job right away at an animal hospital, and the others, I think, were jealous of her background and her knowledge. She also carries herself very well. She's confident,
Yeah.
and some people don't like that when they've been somewhere for a long time, and maybe they're just getting by, and then somebody new comes in and they're all about it. That can cause some friction. Long story short, my friend Brian, my keyboard playing friend Brian, called me one day from Nashville and said, "What are you guys doing?" And I said, "We're kind of in a gray area right now. We really don't know. Angel's not happy here. Uh, we're done with the band." He said, "Well, you should move to Nashville." And that's why? Now this was 1993 at this point, I want to say.
Yeah. The
Um,
infrastructure for Nashville's not quite what it is today.
no, it certainly was not. But I will tell you this. He said there are gigs galore. There are playing gigs galore out here. Now, I didn't equate galore with thousands of people looking for gigs. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So we were home together, and I looked at her and she looked at me, and I said, "What do you think about all this?" She said, "Throughout my childhood, I always dreamed of living in Nashville, Tennessee." So we did our rendition of the Beverly Hillbillies in reverse. We sold everything we could sell. We got rid of a bunch of stuff. We got rid of one of the cars, and we put all our stuff in a shared tractor trailer and went east. And I'll tell you what, it's been the most wonderful adventure. And it's been a never look back situation. I miss the beauty of California. I miss the weather in
Yeah.
California.
Hmm.
And that's it.
I lived in Los Angeles area a couple of times. I was down in Orange County for a stint. I was
Yep.
a pianist with the Marine Band at El Toro, California.
Awesome.
And then ended up in school in Boston at Berkeley, and then ended up going back to LA afterwards,
You telling me
LA proper. So I understand the Midwesterner being a Michigan person going to California
Yeah.
and trying to fit in. I also understand being a musician in a city with lots of opportunity, but an oversaturated population of talented people fighting for those positions. So I identify and I get all of that, and it's really fantastic hearing it. But what I'm hearing is this really sounds like God is putting putting
Oh yeah.
these little things in your path.
Oh yeah.
He's creating these relationships for you and allowing you to meet this random person in Toledo, Ohio that is going to just fall in line with you and just say, "Hey, I've always dreamed of Nashville."
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I don't believe in coincidences. I think that has some divine
Yeah.
providence
Not
in it
like
right
that.
there.
Yeah. Not like that.
Yeah.
Not like that.
Yeah. So let's fast forward a little bit. I know we could talk about all of the different people that
Yeah.
you've
I'm
played
sorry. I
with
tend to get off on.
and all of that, and it's all massive. And put it I'm going to put it up on the screen and all of that. But how does this fast forward? How does Def Leppard enter the picture? And how did that opportunity? How did you get that opportunity to
So
work
that's
with
another
Sav?
that's another interesting story. I'll try to make it as condensed as I can.
Oh, no
Um,
worries.
Fast forward, after moving to Nashville, ended up playing with a very popular country artist for quite a few years. That ended when he decided he didn't want to tour as much. And the day that happened, he laid off half of his band.
Mm.
The very day that happened, I started. I had just we bought our first house, right down the road from where I live now. We finally were able to afford to buy a house, and a couple of months later, I get laid off from the band that I'm playing in, and I'm thinking, I got to put the house up for sale. What do we do? What do I do? So I started making phone calls. By the end of that day, I had been offered my job back with Metallica, at an extraordinarily higher rate of pay than I was making the first time.
Woohoo!
But the only reason I bring that up is because it was going back to working for somebody else.
Yeah.
And I did it immediately. And it was right. It was the right thing to do. The Metallica organization, that's a whole different big, long, drawn out dissertation. I did that. It wasn't a happy place, but it was a really good gig. It was well paying. It was good. What's the word I'm looking for? Good hotels, good working conditions. That kind
Yeah.
of thing.
Yeah.
We fly on a charter and and have a bus on each end and all of this stuff. But what that also equaled was no sleep, cranky people, that kind of thing. So in 2000, Metallica took a year off, and I went to work for another band called Matchbox 20, whom I'd never heard of. I didn't know the first thing about them until I went to my first day of rehearsal, and they started playing songs that I had heard, for a few years over the radio, big hits.
Mm-hmm.
So I did an 18-month long tour with those guys, finishing up in 2001. The monitor engineer on stage left next to me was an English fella named Phil Wilkie, who works with Keith Urban now here in Nashville, of all places. But Phil, his nickname was Side Phil because he works on the side of the stage.
Oh, that's fun.
And Side Phil had an amazing sense of humor, and he was an old Def Leppard alumni. He was, back from the Hysteria days. And every sound check afternoon, when we would get done, he had his little tea kettle and some proper English tea, and he would make cups of tea for a few of us, and we'd sit around and he would tell Def Leppard stories. And I said to him at one point, I said, sounds like they'd be a fun bunch to work for. And he looks at me with this very sort of serious look on his face, and he says, you would be extraordinary out there. I thought, well, tell somebody, would you? And never gave it another thought at that point. We get to LA to do a show, Matchbox 20 show in LA at the Universal Amphitheater, which became the Gibson Amphitheater, which is no longer there.
Yeah.
And Phil brings me over to this guy, this biker looking fella with long dark hair and a beard, and introduces him to me as Wolfie. And Wolfie and I chat. We end up hanging out the whole afternoon. He stays for the show. He's, with me. We're talking and laughing and carrying on. I did not know at that time that Wolfie was the backline crew chief for Def Leppard.
He was headhunting.
And this all came about because of Phil and our conversations over the period of 18 months. He reached out to Wolfie when they realized that they needed to do something. And that's basically how that came about. The next thing you know, I was on a plane to Ireland to rehearse for a couple of days for a show working with Rick Savage, who had never actually had his own bass tech. He had always had the production manager doing his stuff. And he was looking for somebody to be dedicated to him. And flew to Ireland, literally knock on Joe Elliott's front door, because that's where they're going to be rehearsing, at his house.
Yeah.
We get halfway through a day of rehearsal, and the tour manager comes in the main room in the studio, waving his arms in the air, saying, "Stop, gig's off." And we're like, "What?" He says, "The gig in South Korea that we're going rehearsing for has been canceled." So here we are in Dublin, Ireland. What do you do in Dublin if you don't have anything else to do? You pack everything
up. Go see your parents.
You go to the pub. So the next thing you know, I'm 2 days into this, and I'm sitting in a pub in Dublin with the members of Def Leppard and their crew. They're asking me questions. I'm asking them questions. We're laughing, we're talking, and everything else. And then the next day, I go into a basement area in Joe's studio. Rick Savage, is staying at Joe's house at this point. He used to do that when we'd be working in Dublin. Mm-hmm. So I'm downstairs in the basement, and I'm looking at some of his equipment that, it's grimy. It's some of the stuff, there's loose wires, there's loose knobs, there's this, that, and the other. And I realize that there's somebody behind me in the room, and I turn around, and it's Sav. And he says, "What you got going?" And I said, "Well, some of this stuff needs a little TLC. I'm just touching things up before I fly home. Just want to make sure that the next thing you do, some of this stuff works a little better than it probably does now." He says, He says, "Okay, only have one question for you. What are you doing for the rest of your life?" So that was the day that Sav decided he wanted to hire me.
Okay, so that segues beautifully into my next question. Did you believe him when he said the rest of your life at that point? And because you've been with them for more than 2 decades now.
Yeah. And there's been a couple of times where there's been other things happening for me. Mm-hmm. And bands frequently will take a year or two off in some cases. So, that's happened. But I think I did. I think I did believe him. They were at a point in their career where they weren't doing what they're doing now.
Yeah.
There was a lot of state fairs and county fairs and few larger clubs, mostly amphitheaters and some smaller arenas,
Yeah, that was the state of things for a lot of these legacy rock acts at that point.
Yeah. So I was there for all of that. But I'll tell you what there was always fun to be had. There was always a laugh. There was always a group of people that got on so well that we didn't matter if it was a show day or a day off. We were all together, and just the comedy and a little tragedy now and again, Yeah. But for the most part, I felt for the first time like I was a member of a family at that point,
That really sounds like the secret sauce right there, because you can have an organization that is full of incredibly skilled people, but if they're miserable people, it's not going to last.
You're absolutely right. Or if it does last, it's not going to be healthy.
No,
Right?
it's gonna have some repercussions, and I really think that the audience picks up on all of that as well.
I
You can
think they
tell
do.
when somebody has joy in their life and joy in their heart, and can go out and do these things on a
Share that with
long-term
everyone.
basis.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, you know, as well as I do, that you can go to a performance, a show, a concert, and you can tell immediately if somebody doesn't get along well,
Yeah.
you know, and I've seen my share of that.
Well, and to be honest with you, I could tell that with you, the moment I met you standing in front of British Airways in Hamburg. I honestly, it's like, okay, this person is personable, they're easy to talk to, and they're kind and generous of their time and in spirit, and that goes a long ways.
I appreciate that, Peter. Like you have no idea. I've always gone out of my way, always, since I was a child. Um, my parent, you know, we talk about our parents and their influence and how they bring you up and everything, and they brought me
Mhm.
up well. They taught me to appreciate what I had. They taught me to appreciate others. They taught me to have tolerance um, of others, maybe that I don't disagree or that I disagree with or don't agree with. Um, you know, it's important, and I do appreciate that very much.
Well, you were very
I,
welcome.
I can remember years ago at a huge gig uh, being scolded by one of my fellow backline techs. Backline is guitars, bass, drums, keyboards, anything that the band play falls under our purview as a backline crew. One
Mhm.
of my fellow backline guys, not Def Leppard, said to me one afternoon, "Why on earth?" That's not the terms he used. Are you being so nice to these people? We don't have time for this. And it was during the day. We were setting up for a huge show, huge outdoor stadium performance. And I said, "Man, you know, they're not in my way. They're not preventing me from doing my job, and they're curious. They're young. They're impressionable. You know, what do I want? One of them is going to be working for a band one day,
Yeah.
or playing in a band one day, or managing a band one day. Maybe that might be reaching out to me and offering me a job, you know, that kind of thing. Although that really wasn't in my head, but it's just, you know, you share kindness and hope kindness comes back. And he was genuinely perturbed that I was being kind to these people and answering. All I was doing was answering questions
Yeah.
as I'm stringing, you know, 18 guitars or however many guitars it was at that point that I had to deal with uh, in the sun. But I mean, that's, you know, that always stuck with me. That was years ago, and that always stuck with me. And I always said to myself, based on that nope, I'm never going to be that grumpy guy. If somebody comes up and asks me at a show for a guitar pick, maybe they're not supposed to do that, but I don't care. I'll give it to them because it doesn't cost me anything,
It doesn't cost
and
you
it,
a thing.
and the look on their face makes it worth it to me.
It only there's only gain to be had.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me a few things about your experience at Wacken this year.
Well, you know, the big metal festivals. It was we do a lot of those. Some are good, some are eh. You know, some can really be a pain.
Hmm.
It was very well done. It always is. I want to say it's one of the longest running European festivals.
36 years, I believe.
Yeah, 35, 36, something like that.
Hmm.
And they've obviously over the years learned from their experience and bettered it each year. So everything, you know, we finished in Europe. Where were we? Well, we finished up in Paris, and flew home, and then we had the Wacken Festival back to back with a show in Dubai.
Oh, wow.
And unfortunately, due to current, you know, the current political climate, Dubai was canceled.
Mm.
So we were concerned that they might consider canceling that one, because when you're talking about, everybody had flown home. So, you've got people that live all over the world that work for this band, including the band members.
Yeah.
But no, we flew back over. We spent 5 days in Hamburg, at the airport, Radisson Blu there.
That's where we stayed.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, I wasn't
It
too
was so
enthusiastic
convenient.
about it. I don't know if I told you, but my birthday was the day before I met you.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Well, happy belated
Yeah.
birthday.
Well, thank you. So much involved. But we ended up staying over a couple of days because the flights would be cheap enough to offset the cost of the hotels and everything. So I got to spend my birthday with 3 of my closest working compadres, friends, and we spent the entire day out tripping around, going to beer gardens, going to, eating and walking around, sightseeing, and, having a great time. It was a great way to spend a birthday.
It's a great city.
Yeah. It's different than it was the last time I was there. The last time I was there would have been and spent any time there. A lot of these places we go, we don't spend any time.
Yeah.
I can get off a bus in Paris, walk into the venue, do a show, walk back out, get on the bus, and when I wake up, I'm in another country.
Yep.
And I can tell you what the inside of that pyramid-shaped venue is, what it looks like, and that's about it. So yeah, it's not what it's necessarily cracked up to be. But the Wacken Festival is an extraordinarily well-run metal fest, and I mean, truth be told, I'm not a metal guy, but there was some interesting stuff going on there. Savatage played the same day as us.
Yeah.
I had never seen them before. No, I didn't see them, but I was able to hear them as we were, because they were on right before us on the second stage. There's 2 stages, if you recall, side by side. So yeah, the locals were very kind, very well organized. Everything about it went smoothly, and for a show like that, or for a multiple day festival like that, it doesn't always go smoothly.
Yeah, it's amazing to think that that's a village of 2,000 people.
Yeah,
that hosts 85,000 people every summer for this thing.
Yeah, and I had thought, and in a career, where you've worked for several different bands over a course of years, and you've been to some of these places multiple times, I was convinced that we had been there before with Def Leppard, and it turns out that we had not. Joe announced on stage it was their first time in their 35-year history that Def Leppard played, and he promised it wouldn't be the last, which is his thing, and he means it. But I would have been there. I worked for Aerosmith for a couple of years when Def Leppard had taken some time off, and I had been there with Aerosmith, and it was every bit as well organized, and just the whole backstage area was so well done. And
that's great. I think Def Leppard has the ability to go for an unforeseeable amount of time, primarily because of how young they were when they broke.
But yeah, exactly right. When you're talking about a band in 1977, I mean, that's when Sav and Joe met for the first time, and then 1980, right?
Crazy.
There are bands that I listened to back in 1980 that were 10, 15 years my senior at that point that are still playing.
Yeah.
So you see Def Leppard and you go, well, what's the difference here? Well, the difference is they were, 15, 16, 17, 18 back then,
I was floored because, I'm just shy of 57 myself.
Yeah.
Born in 1969. And so I came up through the 80s. That was my high school years. Right. Graduated high school in 88. So I'm only a few years behind you. Yeah. But seeing Def Leppard in middle school, I would have never had any concept or idea that these guys are less than 10 years older than me.
Right. Yeah,
Boom.
I'm trying to think if I went to any concerts well, I guess I would have. Uh, when did the first Boston record come out? 1976.
76 or 77.
So
Yeah.
I was at their first headlining show in San Francisco. They ran out of material and actually came out and played More Than a Feeling twice.
Oh, wow.
But would have been 76. I should check and see. I'm I'm very fortunate and very blessed to have been interested in music in the mid 70s to the mid 80s.
Yeah.
Man, look at what happened musically during that period of time. And then compare it to any 10-year block after that.
Mm-hmm.
You can't. In my opinion, you can't.
You were gifted with multiple things, and that's one. And you mentioned the other one earlier, and that was the love that your parents gave you for that Great American Songbook, the Frank Sinatra,
Yeah.
and all of that. That combination right there really, really is it. Because the kids today, they drop into today.
Yeah.
And they don't look back to what
Yeah.
came before, so they don't get that education, unfortunately.
No, they don't.
But I was gifted with that same thing. My parents introduced me to Beethoven, Bach, Thelonious Monk, Frank Sinatra, Ella Fitzgerald, all the whole deal.
Yeah.
And then I discovered Toto and Supertramp and Styx and Rush and Triumph and Steely Dan and my head starts spinning, and Stevie Wonder and all of this, and that combination.
50
beautiful.
years ago the other day, now I don't remember the actual date, might have been the 16th, the 15th something. 50 years ago, Leonard Skinner released their first record, pronounced Leonard Skinner.
Yeah.
I bought that record the day it came out. I rode my bicycle over 2 miles down to the local music store to buy that record. I did the same thing with the first Boston record. I've still got around here somewhere, I've got a box of my original vinyl.
Oh, that's great.
But 50 years have gone by since that record came out. And you listen to that record and it's extraordinary, you know? And that's just one of hundreds of examples of what was going on back then.
Mm-hmm.
And so so if I graduated
in
1980, so 80, 79, 78, 77. So 76, I would have been in 8th grade, right? If I graduated in 1980.
Man.
Seventh grade. Yeah, 7th and 8th grade, going to shows. My first concert ever was seeing a band called Montrose.
Oh, yeah.
And that was at Winterland in San Francisco. And that was kind of, that was the switch that was thrown. You know, I knew what I wanted to do. I knew how interested I was. But man, when I saw it for the first time and experienced it for the first time, sitting in that venue and those lights came down and the sound was just like a force that hit you, you know?
Yep.
It was like, okay, yep. This is exactly it. This is exactly it. Some way, shape, or form, this is exactly what I want to do with the rest of my life.
So it hit me like that as well. It was like, this is what I want to do. But it's taken me a lifetime to figure out why I should do it. That's a completely different angle. And for me, as a composer, as an artist, I've been very fortunate myself. On the jazz side, I've got to perform with legendary trombonist Bill Watrous.
Okay.
I was primarily a jazz guy for a long time. Worked with Will Kennedy of the Yellow Jackets.
Okay, yeah.
Eric Marienthal, jazz sax player that was with the Chick Corea Electric Band.
Sure.
I've worked with multiple Grammy-winning artists, supporting roles always.
Yeah.
So I've been that guy. I've been in your position where I've been the supporting guy, and then teaching. It's like sharing the wisdom and the love for the passion for what you're doing.
Sure.
And it took me a few years ago when I wrote this show, He Rules the World, to really say, well, I think I've been formed and I've been molding myself into this person to do something bigger with all of the bits and pieces that I've been given in my life.
Yeah.
And so at a certain point, I really determined as like, okay, so yeah, I like playing rock and roll. Yeah. Okay. So I like playing jazz. All right. So I like doing all of these things, and I'm good at doing a lot of them. But why should I be doing it? And it all came back to, well, for me, this is the faith aspect, is that I determined that, well, gosh, God's given me all of these opportunities
Mhm.
and all of these ways to cultivate them and meet people and communicate and all of that. I need to put them all together and give them back,
Right.
to give them back to God. And
Yeah.
so now I'm mainly focused on faith-based large works. This He Rules the World, a concert telling of the Nativity story, which is basically Trans-Siberian Orchestra,
Right.
but telling telling the Nativity story
Right.
on stage with lights and LED
Wow.
and all sorts. And to date we've got, I think, 32 performances of the show under our belt over a course of 4 different productions.
Wow. Wow.
I'm
Oh,
working on a new thing called Requiem for the King, which is a rock opera that tells the story of Christ being sent to earth, dying on earth, and being resurrected, but it's as witnessed and sung from the perspective of the angels Gabriel and Michael,
no kidding.
and them trying to reconcile the story, because they don't know everything. They're given their task, and then they go and they perform it. And so, this is similar, I think, to what I'm hearing from you, is that it's like you spend all of this time learning these things and figuring these things out about yourself. But then I had that epiphany as to, why was I placed here? Why
Right.
was I given this? And how can I use that to now bring this all together? And that's the place that I'm at, and it's a wonderful place to be.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it opened the doors for the podcast, and then the spin-off podcast, and all of that. And it's been a fantastic journey, which
That's awesome.
your journey is fascinating to hear.
Well, it has its moments.
Well,
You know?
yeah,
There's
and then
always
it has their other moments.
Yeah, there's always, the trade-offs. I have 2 kids that are both in the business. I'm very proud of them. But I was gone for a fair bit of their upbringing,
Yeah.
for 3 months, 2 months at a time. But long enough for it to make a lasting impression. So there's a bit of guilt that I feel.
I'm sure
Certainly.
there is. Let me interject there and give you a word of hope, and maybe a little consolation for your soul there. Imagine what your situation would be had you not been that kind and giving person, and that you went the other path and you were the miserable person.
Yeah,
How then would your children be?
yeah, yeah. Fair enough. Fair enough. I do think of that and realize that, and know that I've done my best for them uh, every day, every minute of
Yeah.
every day. And at 27 and 24, you know,
Mhm.
maybe there's a minute here or a minute there where maybe they don't think that's the case, but they're my kids. No, in all fairness, they're both in the music business. My son works for Leonard Skinner, actually.
Wow.
He's a set carp and assistant stage manager for them, and he's a very talented camera guy, just a photographer, a videographer. He's taken he graduated from a video production class, top of the class kind of a thing, and directed a movie that did real well. And then my daughter is out with a guy named Riley Green. He's a huge up and coming country artist, and she's running his backstage area, setting up his dressing rooms, and production assistant, and it 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 makes me smile that they're both, after all these years of them coming to visit me at shows, and there's nothing like 1.5-year-old wearing a laminate pass around his neck, dragging on the ground because it's as long as he is.
Yeah.
And walking out on stage in front of 75,000 people when I'm not paying attention and hearing the roar of a crowd. And he's out there with his little Hawaiian shirt with his arms up in the air, waving at this crowd of 75, 80,000 people up at Kentucky Speedway. They got an early taste of that. They grew up around these Def Leppard guys.
I'm sure they loved it.
Yeah. So they're both making a decent wage, and they're paying their dues, but at the same time, not nearly as many dues as I had to pay.
Well, that's your job, though.
That's the perk.
That's the way of life.
Yeah. But,
so let's circle back here, and we're getting a little close on time here, but
okay.
I do want to end where we began. And if you hadn't been wearing that Faith T-shirt in the Hamburg airport, you and I probably wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation.
Possibly.
So after 20 or more years of touring, and all the places you've been and all the people you've met, and the highs and the lows, and all those difficult moments along the way, what role has faith played in your life and navigating this career?
It's kept me grounded. It's kept me positive. It's kept me engaged in what I do and how I do it. I'm by no means a perfect individual, but it does give me peace, especially when I'm in a hotel room on a night off, on the other side of the planet. For instance, on my wife's birthday, or my son's birthday, or my daughter's birthday, or, God forbid, one thing I've always put my foot down about is that I have to be home with my family for Christmas. It's a very important time, obviously, but it's an important time for our family. My parents, I lost my mom last year. I lost my dad in 2018. My wife lost both of her parents, one when she was young, her mom when she was young, and then her dad just a few years ago. So this is all we have now. My wife has brothers and sisters, and I have a brother, but we're all far away from each other. So we have our four of us, our family. And it's given me, it's still hard being gone. It's given me the ability to continue to love what I do through the good times and the bad times, because I'll tell you, it's not always perfect. Yeah. Touring with a rock and roll band, there's plenty that can go wrong. There's plenty that can be done wrong. There are people that will do their best to insinuate themselves into things and push away others that they don't like. And I mean, there's any number of things, but it's given me the ability to be able to go to the airport and get on a plane, travel to where I need to go, and accept the fact that while I'm gone, I'm never alone. I'm never alone in that regard, and that faith gives me the peace that I need to make it through those days, those long days, long weeks, long months. It's an interesting time right now. I've never been one to outwardly, I certainly am not interested in pushing my faith on anybody.
Yeah.
I am interested in helping someone understand, maybe helping them understand their own, that they don't, even know is there. But as I get older, and I'm 64, just turned 64, I got more time behind me than I do in front of me at this point. And I wonder sometimes, gosh, should I stop doing this? Should I stay home? Should I spend the rest of my days retired, and there are some things that we want to do, and at the same time, I still love what I do, uh, and it gives me the hope that I need to be able to go do it, knowing that I'm coming home, and knowing that what I'm doing is helping my family,
Yeah.
no matter how much sometimes I don't want to go. You know, I don't know if that adequately answers your question,
Abs-
but
Absolutely.
it's
Absolutely.
it's an interesting time. There are a lot of people in in the entertainment industry, certainly in the music industry, but in a more broad sense, the entire entertainment industry. Being a person of faith is not the most popular place to be for entertainers and people who entertain, as I'm sure you can imagine.
Absolutely.
And I've, you know, I'm surrounded by people that will make judgment and make uh, say things belittling the faith that I have. Maybe not personally, but but making, yeah, what can I say? Making little of anyone's faith just seems to be okay now. To with social media and and even in person,
Yeah,
the
it's open
jokes and
game.
the wisecracks and the
Open
comment.
season.
I'm sorry.
It's open season right now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
open season. And
Yep.
that, when I growing up, and I come back to Leonard Skinner, Gary Rosington was one of my favorite guitar players. Still is one of my favorite guitar players. Um, just his playing style spoke to me in a very unique way early on, and I can remember him. He had a Faith T-shirt that he was frequently photographed in, and his cross on the outside around his neck on stage at these Leonard Skinner shows. And I'm talking about back in the heyday, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and I thought, that's pretty cool that he can feel comfortable doing that, you know. I always thought about that. And when I found that shirt, it's so I have two shirts that I get comments on all the time. That's one of them. And the other says, awesome, like my daughter. And, when I'm so walking through the airport in London, and I was lucky to be able to get into the business class lounge. I had a 7-hour layover going home after I saw you.
Mm-hmm.
And even in the business class lounge where you wouldn't expect this kind of thing, I got several people coming up and tapping me on the shoulder and saying, I love your shirt. God bless you. God bless you for wearing it. God bless you for feeling comfortable enough to wear it. People are scared to
Yes.
profess their faith in this
Yes,
world.
they are.
And you know what? I'm not. And I don't go out and preach it. I don't go out and belittle people who don't have faith or have some sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Everybody's entitled to live their lives the way they want to live them, as far as I'm concerned. I've always felt that way. But I am happy letting other people know that I'm a man of faith.
And you can do that with your actions and with your words and without proselytizing and preaching.
Yeah.
And you can do all of that. There is a time and a place for all of that.
Yeah.
But the simple act of wearing a faith T-shirt with a cross on it certainly opens doors. It it opened this door. So
Yeah.
I'm grateful to it.
So am I. So am I. Yeah.
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 Yeah, Aidan, thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Of
It's been
course.
really great hearing your story and the story of the guy that I just happened to meet in the
Yeah.
airport in Hamburg, and
Yeah.
I appreciate you sharing this story with us.
Coincidences are something that, I can't say I don't believe in them, but at the same time, I think there's more to it than that. You know,
Coincidence is a fancy way of denying that God has His hand on things, and
finger on the scale. Yeah. Yeah.
it's absolutely. I'll tell you. Here's the other thing that just happened to happen while I was in Hamburg, and this is just a little God moment for me as well. So my wife had a very good friend that she knew when she was living in Dallas, Texas,
Mhm.
and we're down here in Austin, Texas now, and and this friend ended up marrying a gentleman from Germany and moving back to the Hamburg area.
Okay.
And so we were going to visit them. And they're Christians as well. And they said, hey, we've got this great place that you guys can rent this apartment while you're staying here for the 9 days that you're going to be here. Go
Okay.
ahead and we'll set this up for you. You can stay there. It's really great. It's attached to this ministry,
Huh.
and we didn't really know anything about it. We get there, and the apartment's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful, and it's in this business building, because in Germany, if you own a small business, you're allowed to have a residence in the business building itself
Huh.
as part of their tax code. You can do that. So
Interesting.
this place was absolutely gorgeous, really modern, and it was spacious, and it was like perfect. Um, and on the other side of the wall was a recording studio. So this ministry has a recording studio, and they produce praise and worship music for Northern Germany.
Okay.
And we had no idea that this was the case. And so I'm there. I'm like, this recording studio right here. I've got to meet these people. So it turns out that they owned the Hartung Greeting Card Company, which is an international greeting card company, kind of like Hallmark and Crown.
Right.
And they also run this ministry called Lighthouse. And so I was like, well, I'd love to meet these people. And I always travel with my camera and a couple of mics. And
Huh.
so I met them, and I did an interview with them and got a tour of their facility, and another podcast episode out of that actually is airing tonight, the same day that we're recording this.
Huh.
And it was just another one of these God incidents that I wasn't going to Germany for professional reasons,
Right.
but God's like, oh, you're going to be there. Oh, guess what? We're going to open these doors for you. And guess what? You're going to be 30 minutes away from Wacken.
Yeah.
And I'd never even heard of Wacken.
Yeah.
I'm not a metal guy either. I'm progressive rock
Sure.
and jazz and all of that. But I appreciate a lot of rock, and I don't or metal, but I don't really even consider Def Leppard to be metal. They're
No.
more hard rock or classic rock. But these doors are opening, and then I went and spent a morning walking around the village of Wacken while the
Yeah.
festival was going on, and I didn't have tickets to the festival, so I couldn't get in.
Ah,
But shot a bunch of B-roll, and then met you at the airport. Got an
fantastic.
interview with Olaf and Uta Reiner at the Lighthouse Tone Studio, and I mean, God is good.
Yeah.
God is good.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Aidan, thank you so much for joining me on Extra Credit with the Professor. And to everyone watching, thank you for joining us. Until next time, I'm Peter Emerson, and this has been Extra Credit with the Professor.
Awesome.